So U.S. Soccer got a committee going and said, we want to revamp what college soccer looks like. I want to start from the beginning that this is more focused on the men's side of the game. The women's side is going to be looked at. Cindy Cohn, the U.S. Soccer president, has come out and said, hey, we're going to address the women's game because they're at a little bit of a different stage and the importance of how the college game impacts the women's game. So right now, we're really just going to be focusing on the men's side. And there's a crazy amount of proposed changes from U.S. Soccer. We're talking a calendar overhaul so that the season isn't just 4 months long. Okay, you're trying to play at least one game a week so the coaches can actually coach as opposed to having a game every 2 or 3, 4 days after each other. A regional realignment. So you'd have all 213 Division I teams would split into 4 regional conferences. So it's like 50 to 54 teams each, and they would be tiered. There's a tiered league system. Each region would be divided into 2 levels. A top tier comprising 2 divisions of 9 most competitive teams, with air quotes around most competitive. Year 1 teams would be ranked using objective criteria. Pro Rel would be introduced in future seasons, which I find interesting. Another. These are just some of the proposed changes, but one of the ones that I really do like, and Tones, I want to get it because we want to know. Me and Chuck want to know what college was like back in the 50s for you. But there was one that I really liked, that if a player goes through an MLS academy or goes through an academy system anywhere in the world, and it gets kind of stalled out and maybe they're not going to go to the first team anytime soon, there's a pathway back for them to go back into college, get their education, and then eventually maybe go back into the pro system after that. I like that rule a lot, and there's a lot to dig into here, but what are you saying about these changes overall? It feels like it's time for college soccer to kind of expand things.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised that the NCAA hasn't figured out a way, but they've got some other issues they're dealing with. It sounds like there's a bunch of Division I soccer college coaches that over the last couple of years have been trying to make some changes and have sort of internal discussions. So I know there's a little bit of a surprise, having spoken to 2 college coaches since this came out, that U.S. Soccer sort of intervening here, if you will. One question came up for them. When I brought it up to the first person I spoke to, he said, well, when do I go and recruit in this thing? Right. That was one concern, because now normally you spend the spring and you're going to recruit all the time and then you're playing in the fall, but they like the schedule. They just got to figure that part out. It's going to cut down on travel money. The conference thing, I think, is going to be a little bit weird because you guys know, even though there's been a lot of change in conferences for teams, conferences are such a big thing in college. Like, I play in the SEC if you're a football player. I play in the Big 12 if you're a baseball or, SEC player, ACC. I play soccer. Like, that's such a big thing. I don't know how you take a sport and just take it out of the conferences. So they'll have to figure that part out. There's some really good things. The one you mentioned, I like, and I think part of that is that will improve college soccer because you'll get some guys that were maybe pros or trying to be pros at that level. We're going to skip college soccer. And in this day and age, if you skip that, your career is over. Now you can come back to college and potentially play. So that's going to improve the game a little bit.
And get an education, a proper education.
Yeah, the education part, I think, speaks for itself, right, Charlie? We forget that all the time. Well, one thing we forget is that college soccer and we can say academy soccer, we're doing all of this for like less than 1% of the people. The other 99.9%, they get a good education out of this thing and they go and live normal, productive lives in the community and go on to whatever career. So we always kind of equated to who made the national team or who made there's so many more that don't make it. We got to worry about those kids too. But I like some of the changes.
I think just building off this conversation, and there are a number of college coaches that we all know that, we've had relationships over the years. We've seen them grow. And I think the game needs to be modernized in college soccer. It's such a old kind of barbaric system, especially when you're thinking about how do we keep the level high? Because sometimes you're seeing some of these games where they're playing out of conference games to build some of the stats and build, your strength of schedule. So you have these massive matchups with, again, you're playing a team to beat them 10-0. What good does that do? Or you're trying to strengthen your record. But ultimately, I think, one, you're trying to bridge the gap between professional environments and the college soccer environment, because right now it's too big of a gap and too much time off, and you're not getting quality training sessions. Because let's talk about Stanford, join the ACC or Cal. Now you're flying to Boston College to play games, and you're flying to SMU in Texas. So think about already regionalized matches and in the history of conferences. That's kind of out the window. So for me, I was always a big, hey, these rivalries are so important in the college landscape, but it's already been torn apart, and mostly by money, right? And football conferences are the reason for that. And then I think about, the increased competitiveness. Okay, let's get more teams that are on the same level to play against each other, because that competition drives, one, development, but also it raises the stakes. And then I'd say the enhanced athlete welfare and efficiency, because think about these guys traveling all the time, playing match after match after match, and you're talking about travel, mismatches, the overload schedules, and the mental and physical side of the game for college soccer players. It's devastating. So higher, now you're going to switch that up for higher quality training, more recovery time, and less time on the road. I think that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, you got to put school in there, right? They have to have time. They're quote unquote student athletes. So student
recovery and school. It's
right, exactly. I remember when I was playing, and I think we have some photos of all of us playing back in the day. But I used to take my easiest classes. I took a class at UCLA called Roman Gladiators during the season, and I just go sit in there and we just talk about the role of Roman gladiators and what it meant to that era of time and sport at that time, and the distractions that it provided, and the tribalism that it blah 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 blah. And so it was a really easy class, but I had to take those. I couldn't take any of these core courses. That I was a math major, and I was just like, I'm not going to sit through advanced algebra when I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get into the team, or we got a game every 2 or 3 days. It's hard, and so there's a lot to balance. I actually think on the school side, you should be able to approach that as a student in a more meaningful way as well. So yeah, I like all the things that you're saying there.
Would you also say, in terms of the schooling, right? There can be more of an effort to prepare these potential professionals in terms of how to balance finance, how to, public speaking. Like, there could be more of an emphasis on preparing these guys to be a professional. And I think, some schools do it really well, but not all schools.
Yeah.
And I think in that instance, that's where you're setting these guys up to succeed, because they can enter the business side of soccer as well. And I remember talking to Don Garber when I retired, and he was saying, hey, we want more guys on the business side because they understand the sport. And so they can really propel Major League Soccer and the sport in this country.
Yeah, to get more insight on this, Henry Bushnell, The Athletic, wrote a great article on, and at the end, there's actually a bit that I want to get into, Tones. It's from JT Batson and Cindy Cohn, who told The Athletic, is that college soccer helps facilitate participation at all levels of the game, right? It produces pro players, but it also incentivizes parents to put their kids on the sport. It helps create fans, executives, to your point, Chuck, referees, and coaches. Batson went on to say it's one of our unique advantages as a country, so we want to be great at it, which is kind of, I guess Henry Bushnell was asking why U.S. soccer is getting involved, and I think they can see there's a lot of layers to it. Now there's another piece to it. I watched a game recently. Oregon State was playing, and they almost their whole starting 11 was foreign players. And that's a trend that we're seeing now too. And so what's going on with the American player?
I can tell you right now, Jimmy, it's really simple. Look at University of Vermont when they won. By the way, can you imagine University of Vermont were winning the national title like that? Amazing for New England, but a small soccer school, right? And it's about recruiting the right foreigners. And the reason why schools have resorted to I guess recruiting these foreign players is because the U.S. soccer player, the top ones who used to go right into college soccer, all three of us are products of college soccer. They are now going into MLS academies and into MLS Next Pro and into MLS if they're good enough, right? So then that next layer, in their mind, the quality is not high enough. So why not go and find the guys in Europe who fell through the system or fell through the cracks and and are still top quality players, but not good enough to play at the highest level. So they were able to recruit them. And next thing you know, you have a team built of top foreigners who haven't maybe a shot to come into MLS because they were standouts in college soccer, or worse, in worst case scenario, they're professionals in the USL level. So I think that's why we've seen that happen over the years, because again, there are so many kids in this country. College soccer should be the perfect place to mature and grow.
Chuck, you need this oxygen mask. You took all your air there, Big Tones.
But Jimmy, to your point, this is where that rule about kids potentially coming back to play. Those kids who don't make it in those academies, and they still have an opportunity to come back and play, get an education, potentially improve, but they will make the college soccer game better, and it will put more Americans back in college, because Chuck's right. The kids just aren't going. Those top elite players are not going that route anymore.
So when I look at the top MLS teams right now, I'm looking at the table. I'm trying to find out which of these teams, of the ones that made the playoffs, let's say, are driven by American players.
Well, I don't know that there's any that these days in the league that are driven by American players.
Right.
Like, I don't.
Nobody in the top 10 in scoring is American, I don't believe, this season. And top 15 in assists, we'll have to take a look at that.
But I think you can go league by league and say the same thing.
For sure. That's fair.
Leagues all around the world.
But I just, for me, the college experience was important. I don't think I would have been ready to be in a professional environment at 18. I needed college, and I think there are probably quite a few players that need to. It's not just about developing as a player; it's about developing as a human, and having a little bit of a bridge from living at home with your parents through high school and all that process, and then having a little bit of a buffer of going through it with similarly aged people, trying to figure out who they are, what they want to become, where they're headed, and then you can kind of get into that professional environment. That's where I see the real value in college, and I think maybe a lot of our young players could use that type of experience before they made the jump. And so I still want college to be a heavy part of how we're developing players. But so I'm glad, ultimately, I say that because I'm excited that they're trying to create a model that's a little bit more similar to what we see in professional environments. Tones.
I'll give you just a little pushback on that for yourself, right? You say you wouldn't have been ready, right? You don't think you would have been ready. But the thing is, MLS academies are now getting, you probably thought about becoming a professional player a lot later than some of these kids are now, because they're being prepared. You didn't say LA was your team, right? You grew up and you went through the LA Academy, LA Galaxy Academy. At 14 years old, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about you're in the LA, like you're thinking about the first team, and that's the beauty of the academy. You weren't thinking about the. I wasn't. We all like you said, we're all college products. I wasn't thinking about that. Yeah, of course, I dreamed about being a professional player, and I dreamed about that when I was 5 years old, right? But you're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel until later. No. These kids now are seeing it, man. I just know from being in the youth national team programs and watching these 14-year-old kids talk about, I want to play at Dortmund, or I want to play here. I'm like, their journey starts a lot sooner than our journey started in their head. And you'll see it Chuck, as your kids go through it, they'll start talking about it a heck of a lot earlier than you ever did. Like I said, of course, we'll have dreams,
right?
Right.
The level of exposure is crazy. Everyone has iPads. Everyone has phones. It's on every streaming service. You can watch Champions League just by putting up your phone or your iPad. It's way past YouTube at the moment. So I think now kids can have that access, which wasn't there before if you're an elite player. So I think that kind of plays into, hey, my path. They don't even want kids playing high school soccer. Remember how important high school soccer was and what that was a part of your development, unless you go to a prep school. So, Jimmy, to your point, I think I would have been able to move to an professional environment after high school, because I boarded for 4 years, and it was an incredible experience. And I'd say the focus was more on in the classroom and developing as a human being than it was as an athlete. So then I would have been ready to go. Hey, I'm in a professional environment. I'm ready to go. But college does serve a purpose. And I look at some of the players who have come through the college system as of late. Tajon Buchanan, the guy's playing in Villarreal right now, national team. Kyle Laren, some of those college. Then Jack Harrison, right, playing in the Premier League. So there are players as of late who have come through the system and can contribute in a big way, not only in MLS but with their national teams.
Yeah, I think what's cool maybe now for the kids than when we were coming through was that there's more paths to get seen. The visibility is as high as ever. And then it's up to you to take advantage of those opportunities.
Wait, but
you're seen.
In that, Jimmy, don't you think college soccer then should be better, given that there are more players who are developing, who are exposed to all of this? The coaching should be better. There's more leagues, there's more teams. Therefore, the system should be that much better. No, shouldn't the American player. That I'm not understanding where the gap is or where the misconception is, because if there are more players playing and the level is higher at a younger age, because I've been around, I'm seeing U10s to U14s, everyone in watching them play is well ahead of where we were at that age. So why isn't the college game that much better with at least the American player?
Yeah, that's a big conversation. And honestly, we're going to have more time dedicated to this topic moving forward. We're going to try to get some college coaches on and really get a 360 perspective on this. So we're going to hit pause on that for now, because we could go on and on and on.